On Thursday evening, as always, I returned home, feeling the weight of my shoulders from the endlessly stuffed work bag, as if each file and folder was deliberately undermining me from the inside, and my head was still buzzing with numbers, lines of tax codes, and the taste of disgusting coffee that I hadn't been able to finish at the cafe along the way, leaving a bitter taste on my lips and in my mood. Our porch light was already on, and this immediately caused me confusion, because David never remembered to turn it on until I persistently reminded him about it, day after day, until he finally went, grumbling, and flicked the switch. Something inside me tightened, an elusive premonition, as if the air had suddenly become thicker and colder. Opening the door, I tensed up because I was not greeted by the usual joyful clatter of dog paws on the parquet. Not a single joyful yelp was heard, only silence, broken by muffled voices coming from the living room and the quiet clink of cups carefully placed on coasters. I slowly stepped forward and froze. Sitting on the sofa as if at home was Gazelle, my mother-in-law, and she was clearly too comfortable in my living room, where every detail had always been chosen by me and for me. She was wearing her unfailing cardigan, which she wore with such insistence, as if it were her personal armor. Her legs were carefully tucked to the side, and in her hands was one of my favorite mugs, from which she drank as if this thing had always belonged to her. David, my husband, stood next to me, his arms crossed and looking somewhere past me, as if he was afraid to meet my eyes. "Albina," Laura said, turning her head slowly and deliberately, as if she were passing judgment on me. David followed her lead. "The house is mine now. I've taken care of everything." His words sounded so casual, as if he were talking about ordering food and not about ruining my entire life. Laura smiled, a small, almost condescending smile, as if she were handing me a cupcake for tea and not a notice that I was no longer considered the mistress of my own home. I blinked, trying to process what I'd heard. "I'm sorry." "What?" was all I could say. David finally decided to speak longer. "We made a decision. You never let Mom move in with us. You fought it for years, so I did it." His voice was hard, alien, and it made my insides go cold. "What did you do?" I breathed out, but the only answer was Laura's look and her leisurely sip from my mug. "This house is mine now," she said calmly, as if reading a dry report. "David said that all the paperwork is done. You have no reason to be here anymore." I looked at David, expecting a denial, at least some movement in my direction, but he stood motionless, not denying a word. "David, you can't just tell someone that their house is yours. It doesn't work that way." He just shrugged. "You always acted like the house was yours alone." "It's not like that anymore. It's all fair." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the trembling in my hands, and said each word as if I was pulling it out of my chest. "I paid the mortgage, every month for 17 years. $2,300, not a single missed payment. You never touched it. Everything else was on me, too." He shot back. "What about utilities? Grocery? Lawn care?" I actually laughed, short, dry, hurt. "You paid for lawn care once because Mom shamed you for weeding. You went grocery shopping 3 times last year, and that was only because I worked overtime during tax season. That's not the point," he snapped. "You made Mom feel unwanted. After Dad died, she was supposed to live here with us, and you knew it." I stared at him, feeling the ground shift from under my feet. "No, that's what you decided." I never agreed. "She's family," he said coldly. "I am family, too," I whispered. Or at least I thought so. Laura set her mug down with a clang and said, "Look, Albina, let's not make a big deal out of this. Just start packing. You could stay with friends. You're so independent." I looked at her, anger rising inside me. "You really are that confident?" I blurted out. She raised an eyebrow, still calm, even pleased. "David promised I'd be taken care of." He said the house is now occupied. "Honestly, you should be grateful we didn't just change the locks." I looked around the living room and my heart sank. The sofa I'd picked out at a garage sale, the rug my mother had helped me move, the side table I'd put together myself while David complained of being tired and refused to help. These weren't things, but pieces of my life, my memories, my work. My throat tightened, but not from sadness, from rage. "This house has always been mine," I said quietly but firmly. David rolled his eyes. "You think because you paid the mortgage, everything belongs to you? Is that how it works?" "Yes," I said. "That's exactly how it works." He stepped toward me, his face filled with anger. "You refused to compromise for years. You acted as if everything was yours, your work, your money, your space. And me? I gave you life, Albina. I gave you time, energy, support. You brought me dirty laundry, made condescending remarks, and rejected my mother, who never loved me." Laura chuckled, tilting her head. "Maybe if you were a little warmer—" "You mean more obedient?" I interrupted. David turned away, rubbing his temples. "You make everything disgusting." I straightened my shoulders, feeling the trembling go away, leaving only an icy calm inside. "No, I'm just being clear. Do you think I'm leaving just because you want me to?" "You can't stop it," Laura said, rising from the couch. "It's already in motion." "Then let it roll," I said quietly. "But I won't be there to cushion your downfall." I walked up the stairs, each step echoing, like a countdown slowly leading to something irreversible. In the bedroom, I pulled out my old travel suitcase, the same one I had once taken on my first solo vacation. I didn't cry or scream. Instead, I methodically folded clothes for a few days, added toiletries, a charger, a laptop. I left everything else: jewelry, decor, a favorite blanket. All of this was now their burden, and let them live with it. When I went downstairs, David was standing at the door, as if guarding the threshold from me, and Laura was already busily rearranging the pillows on the sofa, arranging them with that businesslike air, as if this house had always been her fiefdom, and my presence here was only a temporary mistake. "Are you really leaving?" David asked, and for the first time there was a softness in his voice that I had not heard for a long time. I looked him straight in the eye, slowly, carefully, as if I wanted to burn him with my gaze, and asked, "Are you sure this is what you want?" His jaw tensed, the muscles moved under his skin, and unable to bear it, he said almost in a whisper, "You're leaving." "No," I answered quietly but firmly. "I'm not leaving." "You kicked me out." He turned away as if my words were too heavy a burden and threw out into the air, "It's better in the long run." "For whom?" I asked, but he never answered. I took a step closer and without breaking eye contact said, "I have one question. Have you ever read a mortgage agreement?" David blinked, his face contorted in confusion, as if I'd spoken a foreign language. "What does that have to do with anything?" he muttered. I smiled, not warmly, but with the cold, forced smile of a woman who knows too much to be fooled. "Exactly," I said. I was almost out the door when Laura's voice came from behind me, high and commanding, like a mistress who was used to giving orders. "Don't take anything that doesn't belong to you." I stopped, paused for just a moment to let my words sink in, and said, "Don't worry, I only take what's mine." She didn't even realize how literally I meant it. That evening I stayed at a modest hotel in the city center. There was nothing special there. A double bed with a hard mattress, cheap curtains, a ceiling with old water stains on it. But it was clean, quiet, and most importantly, peaceful. I ordered takeout, sat silently on the bed, and stared at my phone for a moment before opening my work bag, the one that had always felt like a heavy anchor to me. From its depths, I pulled out a folder I had hidden from myself for over a year. Inside were mortgage statements, closing documents, tax returns, and each document had only one name on it: mine. I had anticipated this moment long ago because David's resentment had been brewing for years, and Laura's presence in our lives had become unbearable even longer. Little comments gradually turned into demands. Her quiet visits became insistent expectations, and all of this was intensified by the day David refused to sign the mortgage. He talked about panic attacks, about how debt scared him to death, and I made a decision. I would take on all this weight, but everything that was built would belong to me alone. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and found a name that always made me smile a little: Gaston. I clicked on the record and said, "Hello, Gaston. This is Albina. I need your help. It's about the house." I've been patient long enough. I sent the message, turned off the lamp, and for the first time in 17 years, went to bed without checking my account balance or wondering what new demands David would make tomorrow. I slept like a person who finally holds all the levers in his hands, and in my sleep, there was neither guilt nor fear. In the morning, I woke up before the alarm went off. There was no headache, no heaviness in my chest, no shadow of David next to me. For the first time in many years, I did not feel like I had to prepare for the new day, as if it were a battle. I sat in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling and allowing myself to simply breathe. Then I got up, got dressed, and went down to the hotel cafe. It smelled of fresh coffee and warm bread, and I found a quiet corner, laid out the folder, and began to make a plan. At 8:02, Gaston replied, "Let's talk this morning." Come to the office. We'd been in high school together, and I remembered how he'd copied from me in history classes and called me the merciless Albina when I was the only one checking the teacher's tax arithmetic. Now he ran one of the largest brokerage firms in the area, and meeting him seemed like an odd but fitting turn of fate. 20 minutes later, I walked into his office building, folder under my arm. The receptionist recognized me and motioned for me to come in. Gaston stood up as I entered. The same tousled brown hair, the same slightly crooked smile, only now in a formal jacket and with weight in every movement. "Albina Hastings," he said with a grin. "It's been too long." "Too long," I said, sitting down across from him. He glanced at the folder and said, "Let me guess. Domestic drama?" I opened it and laid out the papers: the title deed, the original mortgage, the payment schedule from my account, all with only my name on them. "My soon-to-be ex-husband claims he gave the house to his mother," I said calmly. Gaston didn't even blink. "She's the owner?" he asked. "No, never was. David refused to sign the deed, said the debts were giving him panic attacks. Classic. But now he's telling Laura the house is hers. They both tried to kick me out." Gaston ducked his head and said, "And you just walked away?" I shrugged. I wanted to give them a chance to hang themselves with the rope they thought they pulled out from under me. He nodded, reservedly but respectfully, and asked, "So what's the plan?" I looked at him straight. "I want to sell the house quickly, legally and with everything perfectly executed." "You want the sale to send a message?" he asked with a grin. "Exactly," I replied. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder of forms, and said, "Let's make this loud and clear." Back at the hotel, I extended my stay for another week. Everything was already in place. All that was left was to wait. That Sunday, as I was having breakfast on the hotel balcony, enjoying the rare silence and the familiar bitterness of black coffee, my phone rang from a blocked number. I just grinned and didn't answer, because at times like these, I knew there was no good news to be had. A minute later, the device vibrated, signaling a new voice message. I turned it on and heard David's agitated voice, filled with both panic and anger. "Albina, what the hell is going on?" "There's a real estate agent at the door saying that the house is already in the contract stage. According to him, the property is up for sale. This can't be done. We live here." I calmly put the phone next to the cup and didn't answer, because sometimes the best weapon is silence. That evening, he called again and again as if he were trying to knock bricks out of the wall with his bare hands, but I didn't pick up the phone. Then a message came from Laura, written in capital letters, as if she were screaming into the void. "You can't sell this house. We have rights." I laughed bitterly, because it was painfully ironic. A woman who had lived at someone else's expense her entire life was now screaming about her rights. I forwarded everything to my lawyer without even deigning to answer. On Tuesday, Gaston's agent left legal notices at the house. David tried to threaten legal action, but my lawyer promptly sent him a scanned copy of the deed, which clearly had one name on it, mine, along with 17 years of bank statements and a polite request to vacate the premises before filing for formal eviction as part of the divorce. This silenced him for a full 24 hours. But, as expected, a day later he called again. This time I decided to answer. "Albina, please," he said quietly, lowering his voice as if that would bring him closer. "You don't have to do this." "I already did," I answered, looking out the window at the gray sky. "I just haven't told you everything yet." "What does that mean?" There was fear in his voice. "It means that we will see each other on Sunday, exactly at 10 in the morning. I will come to your house." He fell silent, clearly hesitating. "Why?" "To give back what is mine," I said. "And what is that?" "Your consequences Sunday morning turned out to be cloudy, heavy, as if the weather itself had decided to emphasize the ending of this story." At 9:59, I pulled up to the house with 2 copies of all the paperwork: the sales contract, the title deed, printouts of payment schedules, and the maintenance receipts that Laura liked to claim she paid for. But in reality, they were always mine. The door opened before I could knock. David was standing in the hallway in old sweatpants and a stretched-out t-shirt, his face gray from sleepless nights, his eyes darting around, avoiding mine. Laura sat by the fireplace behind me, her arms crossed over her chest, her coffee mug shaking, reflecting the tension in the room. "What is this?" she snapped as soon as I walked through the door. "I told you so," I replied calmly. "I'm here to clear things up." I placed the stack of papers on the dining room table and pulled out a single sheet, a copy of the title deed. "Let's start with this one." It's written here in black and white. "I am the sole owner of the house." David went pale, his gaze darting to the paper. "But I thought you were wrong," he began. "You refused to sign the contract 17 years ago," I interrupted, "because you didn't want to commit. So I took over, and every payment, all $2,300 a month, came out of my account. That's what gives me every right to sell the house." Laura jumped up, her voice ringing. "You're ungrateful. After everything we've done for you?" I turned to her slowly, pausing. "You mean after everything I've done for you?" "When the furnace broke in 2016, I paid for a new one. I paid for your husband's funeral. I bought David a car when his credit was ruined. I paid property taxes, spent on landscaping, replaced the roof, plumbed the plumbing, installed a new fire alarm, and dozens of other little things you take for granted." David slumped in his chair and without looking up muttered, "You're bluffing. You just had an office job. You couldn't afford this." I sat up straight and my voice was hard, confident. "That office job got me a promotion. Do you think I spent 17 years as an administrator? I'm a licensed accountant. I've audited companies that would chew you up and spit you out for fun. I make more money than both of you put together." I watched the color drain from their faces. Laura looked at me with disbelief, David with obvious shame. I pulled another envelope from my bag and put it on the table. "What is this?" Laura asked sharply. I opened it and pulled out several photographs. The first was of David hugging a woman half my age. The second was of them kissing next to a parked car. The third was of them leaving a hotel. David froze, his jaw hanging open. "You hired someone?" he croaked. I nodded calmly. "I planned this all out. The day you started asking me for access to our accounts and control over our finances, I knew something was wrong." "I can explain," he began, but I interrupted. "No need. My lawyer already has all this. You'll have the divorce papers by the end of the week. And yes, I will be pursuing alimony. I've carried the emotional labor for 17 years. Now it's time to hand over the bill." Laura opened her mouth, ready to object, but I didn't give her a chance. "One more thing. After the house is sold, I will deduct all the unpaid expenses you left on my shoulders before dividing the remainder. But I warn you right away, the amount will not be large, so perhaps you should start thinking about finding an apartment now." "You are heartless," she breathed, but David covered his face with his hands and did not say another word. I stood up, slowly looked around the room one last time and said quietly, "You threw me out of my house. Now I will pay you back in the same coin," and I walked out the door before either of them could answer. That evening, back in my hotel room, I dialed Gaston. "It's over," I said, feeling the words fall from my lips as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted. "How did they take it?" he asked, and I chuckled, imagining his raised eyebrow. "Like amateurs," I answered. I heard his muffled chuckle on the other end of the line, and then his confident, "We'll close fast. Cash in hand within a month. Perfect." And it was then, for the first time in the many years since we'd signed the mortgage nearly 2 decades earlier, that I allowed myself to feel that this house, this story, this life were finally truly mine. 2 weeks after that harrowing scene outside the house, the sale was officially completed. Gaston called to confirm the wire transfer, and I sat in a sun-drenched cafe, laptop open in front of me, everything suddenly looking simple. The amount was more than I had expected, even after taxes and legal fees. I slowly closed the laptop, took a sip of coffee, and allowed myself a rare, genuine smile. The house was gone from my life, sold legally, cleanly, without dirt or underhanded games. And every smell, every sound, every memory that had tormented me for years suddenly lost its power over me. I didn't go back there after the last confrontation. I didn't need to. My lawyer coordinated everything: closing, handing over the keys, paperwork. The moving company took away the things I wanted to keep. I left everything else in the house as a silent reminder to David and Laura that they no longer had power over me in this story. The day after the sale, David texted me, "You shouldn't have humiliated us like that." I didn't answer. What was there to say? He humiliated himself when he and my mother plotted to throw me out of the very house I had built financially and emotionally, brick by brick, year after year. I paid for the foundation, the pipes, the roof, every repair, and all he contributed to the common fund was frozen pizzas and endless insults. I learned from a mutual friend that they had moved to a shabby rented apartment on the outskirts of town, a house with a broken intercom and a staircase that creaked under every step. Laura had to sell almost all of her antique furniture to raise the deposit. David's car was repossessed just a week after the deal closed, and he began looking for work again. But no one seemed to want to hire a man in his 40s, with a torn reputation, a credit history that resembled a list of debts, and a habit of blaming the whole world for his own failures. As for his novel, the young woman who graced his photographs disappeared as soon as she learned that David no longer had a home, a car, or a stable income. All that was left for him were his memories and his own mistakes, which could no longer be shifted onto someone else's shoulders. Meanwhile, I hadn't bought a new house. Not yet. I rented a small furnished apartment near the marina. It was smaller than my old house, but quiet, sunny, and completely mine. No one dictated how to arrange the furniture. No one criticized how I cooked pasta or folded laundry. I watered the flowers when I felt like it, worked late if my job required it, and ordered sushi instead of dinner if that was exactly the mood I was in. No one asked questions or demanded explanations. At first, the silence was jarring, as if I lived inside an empty bell. There was nothing to manage, nothing to protect, and this feeling of freedom was frightening at first. But gradually I realized this silence is not threatening. It is deserved. It has become my reward, my personal peace. One Saturday, a few weeks later, I met Gaston at a networking event. He was standing at the bar talking to customers, but when he spotted me, he immediately waved his hand. "Albina, come here. I want to introduce you to someone I almost said no, because I wasn't planning on meeting anyone, especially since my own wounds were still raw. but there was something warm in his gaze that made me stop. The man he introduced me to was tall, a little weathered, with an easy smile and a shirt that, although not designer, fit like it had been tailored especially for him. His name was James. He was a project manager at a renewable energy startup and had just returned from 3 years in Copenhagen. We started chatting. Nothing serious, just stories about travel, complaints about bad coffee on planes, memories of favorite city eateries. When he found out I was in finance, he didn't joke about taxes or ask to see his reports. He asked me what I liked about my job. I smiled. Nobody expects me to smile while I'm doing this. He laughed. That's how I think about budgeting. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a trap, not a setup, but something real. That evening, I received another message from David. It wasn't angry, but for the first time, sincere. I'm sorry. I screwed up. I should have listened to you. I should have appreciated you. I didn't realize how much you were carrying. This time, I responded, with just one line. You didn't understand because you never tried. Then I deleted the message, not out of anger, but out of peace. Weeks passed. My old life seemed more and more distant, like an old grainy photograph fading with time. Sometimes I remembered little things, the way Laura criticized my towels, the way David made snide comments about my job title. And I smiled, not from bitterness, but from clarity. They would never change, and I didn't have to put up with it anymore. One evening, I met James again at a local bookstore. We went out with iced coffee and sat on a bench by the water. Boats floated by in the distance, couples with dogs and paper bags passed. He looked at me and asked, "What do you wish more people knew about you?" The question was so honest that I froze. I don't forgive easily, I said, but when I do, I never forget. I just stopped carrying it around. He nodded and said quietly, "Is that the same as closure?" "No," I said. "It's better." That night, I went back to my apartment and opened the drawer where I kept my last folder. The documents, the photos, the notes I'd collected for the trial but never used. I flipped through them again, and then slowly, page by page, I shredded them. Not because I wanted to erase the past, but because I no longer needed the evidence. I knew what I'd been through, and most importantly, I knew who I'd become.